Hey, let's talk about a topic that a lot of Christians tend to be sensitive about, maybe for a little reason, but it can actually cause a pretty big disturbance. And then I'm going to use an example from my life that is extreme. And I want to go ahead and admit that it's extreme and it's also highly sensitive. And if you have been in abusive situations, it may be triggering. I'm going to try to tell it in a way that hopefully does not come across like that, but I wanted to give you that warning in advance. So Christians tend to be very sensitive about what God is called. In fact, if it's not in this book, if it's not in the Holy Bible, often they will say, well, you can't call God that, especially if it sounds new age. I remember years ago, Oprah doing a show. It was the first time. This had to be back in the 90s, maybe before, I don't know when her show started. But I remember her mentioning God as the universe. And I was young and thought, that's not going to go over well. There's going to be like some preachers talking about that. And sure enough, there were. And even at my church, there were lessons about how you could not call God the universe or source or energy, or I wrote down a few more, or absolute, the divine, light, just light alone, cosmos, no, out of bounds, creator, I think we could use, almighty we could use, Spirit, but as in the Holy Spirit, not as in just God. So it was just interesting how we will get these terms that we want to dictate everybody else's terminology, and we get nervous if somebody uses a word we're uncomfortable with because we don't know what they believe and we don't know if they're on the right path. And we get sensitive, we get judgmental, and some of us, quite honestly, get mean about it. But here's the challenge. We don't know everybody's history, and we don't know their history with the church, and we don't know their history with other believers, or whatever term you want to use. We don't know what they've been through. And just because these terms don't bother us does not mean they don't bother others. So let me give you this extreme example. A little over 45 years ago, I had a teacher enter my life at a time where I didn't have a dad. Now, I had two male figures in my life that acted as fathers. My youth minister, Al Milligren, and my grandfather, who was alive at that time, Daddy B, and they were amazing, amazing influences. And I think it's one of the reasons I was able to navigate the following. And this man paid me a lot of attention. Obviously, he knew that I was in a single parent household, gave a lot of compliments, a lot of affirmations, worked as a mentor, as a guider in my life, took a lot of time with me, spent a lot of time affirming my gifts, my abilities, put me in leadership positions, things along those lines. Well, one day he asked if I wanted to come over to his house to work on like some presentation stuff or something along those lines. I don't actually remember very well because I've really put it out of my mind, and it was only on a walk this morning when I was thinking about this topic that immediately this story came to mind. And so I said, sure. Went over to his house, again, super young. I wasn't driving, and my mom was going to pick me up later that afternoon. You know, this person was well known by the family. And so when we're over at his house working on some stuff, he says, you know what, I really like the way you do your hair. Would you mind trying to do my hair like yours? And I thought, that's just super weird. I said, okay. And he said, well, give me a few minutes. And I was just sitting in the living room. Well, when he called me, he had wet his head, and he was sitting in his bedroom in front of his mirror naked on a stool. And he said, could you come and blow dry my hair and do my hair like yours? And I said, well, I don't understand why you're naked. And he said, well, that's just the way that I get ready. And I'm young. I'm not thinking anything other than this is extremely weird and there's something wrong with this person. And so I went ahead and did it. I'll go ahead and tell you that I did it, did his hair just like mine and all of that. And then afterwards he said, what do you think we should do next? And I said, well, I think that you should put your clothes on. And he said, what if I don't? And I said, I guess I'm just going to tell everybody about this. And so that was my mindset. And you're thinking, why did I tell this story? Because this morning, when I thought about these names of God, I immediately heard the name of this teacher and said, and heard the voice say, if this was God's name, if God's name was his name, would you be okay calling God that? And I was like, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be okay calling God that. And so some people have been abused by somebody using the name Father. And some people have been hurt by people using the name God. And others have been damaged by people using the name Christian. And so when we get sensitive about a name that somebody chooses because they could have been hurt by the use of another name, we need to be careful. Let's let people call God what they want to call God, what they're comfortable using, what feels like a connection, what feels safe. I don't think God would ever want us to call him by a name that other people have used to be abused by, right? And so as I tell that story, and I'll probably tell the full story later, maybe in some more depth, and go into some ways that we can protect ourselves, protect our children, come out of that and find healing. But for today, if somebody's been hurt by the church or hurt by somebody through a very common name for God, give them the benefit of the doubt, give them compassion, let them use the terminology that they choose. Let's go out there and be light. Let's go out there and represent well. Let's go out there and be Christ to a hurting world. Be blessed.